All right, welcome to the Kaizen Show, where we explore the little things that create the big things. I'm your host, Mac Kennedy. I am the founder and head coach at Kaizen Triathlete Academy, and on today's show we have Grace Thek, who's a professional triathlete. Grace, welcome to the Kaizen Show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. First episode.
First episode, yes. Hopefully not our last episode.
I hope not.
Just to cover up for those who don't know who Grace is, Grace has achieved over 20 podiums as a pro, 5 wins, been on top 20 in the world rankings, top 3 in Australia. You have raced in the World Long Course Championships, competed at the T100 series, also raced at 3 of the 70.3 World Championships at Nice, 2021 at St. George, and recently in Topor. We actually said that correctly, I believe. It's blasphemy to say that incorrectly in New Zealand. So to achieve this sort of level of success takes a lot of work, really beyond just swimming, cycling and running. Can you tell us a bit about your journey that sort of, led to this, idea from those on the outside of success?
Yeah, of course. So if I look back on my whole life, always been kind of involved in endurance sports. I started at a very young age, and I always loved, cross country, swimming. Kind of the longer the better. And I actually came into the sport as an injured runner. I spent 4 years in college in America on a running scholarship, and probably got bone stress injuries twice a year. And so I was kind of, a bit bored of always being injured and decided I'll dabble in triathlon and just see how it goes. I've, previously swum, previously run. Can't be that hard to bike ride, right? And so it's kind of just been, the success hasn't happened overnight. It's been basically developing since I was at a young age. And so, I don't know really, I guess having podiums, having wins is successful, but at the end of the day, it's more about, am I enjoying it, and am I bettering myself every day, or maybe not every day, but over each year, getting a little bit better. And I think there's still a lot left to achieve.
Yeah, I think if we sort of go back to the young Grace, what did the success look like for you before you decided to become a professional? Because I think we were just talking before we even started this episode, actually, against comparing ourselves to the other professionals that are in the sport. And sometimes we feel like, that level of success seems just so far away. But this level of success that you have achieved now probably didn't seem achievable even before you made that move to become a professional triathlete. So if we actually go all the way back to the young Grace, what did success look like? And I guess what led you to making this decision to become a professional?
Yeah, I think throughout the journey, there's always little goals that you're trying to achieve. I remember when I was little, I used to do cross country, and it was initially, at 6 years old, I wanted to do my first fun run. It was a 5K fun run, and it was around the Tan, so big Anderson Street Hill. And I had watched my parents do fun runs, and I got sick of watching, so I decided I wanted to do one. And so my goal for the first fun run was just to run 5K without stopping and without having to walk. And so I guess that was, probably one of my first goals, I guess, in endurance sport. And then, later it was I want to beat my dad. So I think I beat him when I was about 11 or 12 years old. We did a running race just around the local park. It was about a 1K circuit. And my dad, I don't think my dad thought it was going to come that early that I started beating him. And then I guess, each year there's new goals and new things to work on. And I think now where I am, it's about kind of bettering myself and, small improvements collectively make big improvements if you look back. So I don't think there's something that I think it's just little goals that accumulate, and then you look back and realize how far you've come. And, my 10-year-old self couldn't probably imagine where I am right now, racing professionally as a triathlete and getting to do that for a living. So I think, it's not until you kind of reflect back on how far you've come that you realize oh, wow, I feel like I've made it. But also at the same time, when you're here, don't necessarily always feel like you've made it. Like there's moments where you think there's a long way to go to be better in the sport and to be more competitive. And I think last year it was awesome to be part of the T100 series where I was racing the best in the world. And even then, you know, there was a little bit of imposter syndrome where it's like these women are just so fast. It's a bit of a reality check. Like I've got so much further to go to be at the pointy end of these races. And I think it's easy to compare yourself with other people, but at the end of the day, it's just your own journey and seeing how far you can go and the improvements you can make, not so much comparing. So I think Calvin, who you know well, he told me comparison is the thief of joy, and it's a quote that I've liked for a long time. And I think, yeah, it's important not so much to compare yourself to where other people are and just to do your own job and your own processes in your own way, and hopefully, you know, you keep improving with that.
Certainly a huge amount goes into becoming a professional triathlete, and it's, you know, weeks on weeks of, for a lot of you, 25, 30 hours a week of swimming, cycling and running. And I guess one of the key things is how do you keep yourself mentally fresh, not just physically fresh? With a background in as a therapist, you would have an idea of how to manage your body and the signs that your body's telling you, and you'd certainly learn that over time. But in terms of staying mentally fresh, is there anything that you do that could help you stay mentally fresh throughout these long weeks of training, preparing for an event? And also on race day, like, as you said, there's some women there that have competed at Olympic Games, people who've won Olympic Games that you're competing against. How do you stay in the right frame of mind to be able to perform on that day?
Yeah, so if we're looking on race day, I guess to stay mentally in the game, it's having confidence in the training, the preparation, and going out there and sticking to your race plan. And yeah, in those races, it does require a bit of dynamic flexibility and going with the group or making the moves when I need to. But I think, yeah, sticking to your own race plan is really important, especially racing the best girls, because it's easy to be like swept away and, you know, go too hard too soon and then blow up on the back of the run. So I think, yeah, on race day, it's more about mentally just having confidence in what I've done and staying focused throughout the race. It's easy to kind of have moments where your mind wanders off and it's kind of coming back to the present moment and just executing, you know, each kilometre, ticking it off. And yeah, that's kind of how I approach race day. And then in terms of just mentally, being mentally fresh, I think it's really important to have, you know, rest periods and, you know, a couple of weeks off throughout the year, not just an end of year break. For instance, last year, my season went from first weekend of February to middle of December. So it's, you know, a long year, and I'm not sure that you can mentally stay focused for that long. So, you know, I made sure to take a week easy after the domestic season and like mid-year during the international season, and find weeks where I can kind of mentally take a break, because I think it's easy to like physically take a break, but mentally, even if you're just doing easy swims, you're still thinking about it. So I think having a reset a couple of times throughout the year is really important. Obviously, taking an end of year break is really important. And this last year, it was probably the biggest break I've taken. It was a complete 2 weeks off mentally and physically. And I think that is going to put me in good stead for this year to kind of be mentally in the game. And then throughout the week, it's, you know, I guess not thinking about triathlon all the time and having a bit more of a balanced lifestyle, which I feel like I'm pretty good at. I'm working at the moment as a physiotherapist 10 hours a week, which has been really fun to, you know, kind of step away for triathlon for those hours and have, I guess, an impact on someone else's life and help someone feel better with their body. And I think, you know, obviously spending time with family and with my dogs as well. I think having those moments throughout the week have been important. Even I'm getting into floats. I'm not sure if you know what floats are, but it's like a float tank.
Float tank,
yeah,
right.
Like immersion into water. And I love them because it's a moment to switch off and you don't have your phone on you and you have no distractions and you kind of go into a state of just being at peace peace and zen, I guess. And I often nod off to sleep, which I think is a sign that I'm relaxed, which is good. But I'm really enjoying kind of that aspect too, to just mentally switch off without the distractions of everyday life.
I guess the key thing is, how do you translate that zen state into race day, that particularly even before race days, race morning, because we often struggle to actually get any sleep the day before. So what do you do around making sure you are mentally in the game but still relaxed to be in that zen state so you can perform on the day? Because if you have a horrible night's sleep the day before, 2 days before, that you start to get into your head about, this is not going the way that I want it to go, and you're already losing before you even take the start line. So what do you find is strategies that you have in place to try and get to that zen state? Because you're not going to have one of those float tanks with you before the race.
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm actually very lucky and I sleep very well before a race. I might wake up every hour thinking that my alarm should have gone off, but other than that, I fall asleep and usually can get pretty good sleep, which is a blessing. And I think going into races with the attitude that I get to do this rather than I have to do it has been really important for me. Going in kind of just in a more relaxed state and just going in with zero expectations and kind of just going in with, I'll do my best and that's all I can ask from myself. And I think having that mentality and being happy in triathlon and happy in life has translated to having really good races. So I try to remove the internal and external pressure as much as I can and just focus on doing my best. My husband will always say, you don't have to be the best, you just have to do your best. And that kind of sticks with me on race day.
I like that. It's actually, I think there's a lot of things that impact us beyond our swimming and cycling and running. And sometimes they seem small and insignificant that do make a big impact. Even just a few words from your husband can make a big impact. Could come from a coach, could come from a family member, could be just a few moments with your dog before you go out for a training session. But there's a lot of these little things that do result in the big picture overall. What else would you highlight as maybe those small, possibly insignificant things that have resulted into where you've achieved today?
Yeah, I think, well, my goal for this year actually is to be a bit more intentional. So even if it's just little things like sitting in the morning and planning the day and having a time frame for things, because I am a little bit of a procrastinator and sometimes my sessions end up being a few hours later than I had initially planned. So trying to stick a little bit more to a schedule has meant that it's been more productive. And I think intentionally, the sessions I go in and I know exactly the aim of the session, which I think has been really helpful to kind of focus on it. And I mean, this is a little thing, like mid-session is that I used to watch Netflix while I was on the trainer.
Yep.
And now I opt for music so I can really focus on the session at hand, because I think sometimes I would just be a little bit distracted by what I was watching rather than the session at hand. So that's the kind of one intentional thing I've changed for this year. And I think it's easy to get distracted, but I think those little things help in getting a better quality session.
It's interesting you talk about Netflix, because I get this from some of my athletes as well, who say, I'm just going to put Netflix on and watch, which is, to me, the key thing is, what do you need to do to get yourself first to show up? And you can obviously make those changes later. Obviously, you're changing that intention to your session to say, now there's no Netflix. I need to turn up mentally, be there for that session.
I guess it does. I have to preface this and say it does depend on the session. Like if it's just an easy 2.5 hours on the trainer, then Netflix is okay.
Netflix is okay.
But I think if there's a session that requires a lot of mental concentration, that
VO2 max reps.
Exactly.
We're gonna chuck on some, whatever.
Yeah. But I mean, as you said, it depends on the person, and if that's going to allow them to get the session done, then I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just for me, I felt like maybe it was a distraction for me. So focusing more on the session and listening to music rather than watching Netflix is probably a better thing for me personally.
And then how much of your training really does come around preparing yourself mentally? Because a lot of people think, swimming, cycling, running, that many hours, that's going to be a lot. And in terms of turning up to a race day, so for those who don't know, the T100 series basically is 100 kilometers. It's more or less similar to what is the Ironman 70.3 series, which is over an Ironman, half Ironman distance. So it's around 2K swim, 80K bike, 18K run to make up the 100 kilometers of the event, which to stay mentally on task, it might seem it's quite a challenge really to be. I think that's where a lot of time is actually lost in long course racing, is to be present and to be ready to make the changes you need to make, whether it's nutrition, whether it's what's happening in the race, whether some of the women are attacking. You got to be present for all of those sorts of things. And I think a lot of people do think about, okay, I need to get a certain amount of swimming and cycling and running in, but how do you get yourself mentally prepared? And I think one of those things is the intention behind your sessions. And I think a lot of people can, not just within triathlon, but outside of the space of triathlon, within sport or in life, is the intention behind that you're trying to create for the actions to drive yourself forward into what you're trying to achieve for yourself. So even if it's uni work or whatever, like, is your phone there, is your computer there? So for yourself, have you found that being a big changer for you of setting that intention and mentally being, there? And I guess follow up from that is, how much of your training is around the psychology and mental state rather than just the aerobic adaptation?
Yeah, I think I've definitely noticed a difference. I mean, I think the focus has really been only the last month of being intentional around my sessions, and sometimes that just means doing, pre-activation stuff before going out for a run rather than just rolling out of bed and going for a run, or looking at the sessions at hand and making sure that I know exactly what I'm doing rather than just get on and then trying to figure out halfway through the session, like, oh, what cadence should I be riding at? So I think that's been helpful. In terms of the mental space, I haven't done a whole lot of training, I guess, for the mental aspect. I think it comes with experience as well. And as you mentioned, 100 Ks is a long time to stay concentrated or focused. And so it's more just about having techniques or strategies when you do feel like you're drifting away from the race, to bring yourself back to kind of the present moment, because it's very easy, especially in these T100 races, which are highly competitive, that moves can happen very, very quickly. And if you're not on the move, then you'll be left behind. Sometimes you'll be left behind regardless, which I have experienced firsthand. But on other situations, I've definitely made kind of maybe a mental error, not so much a physical error, that a group has left and I just mentally wasn't there to go with it. So
and when that happens, so within triathlon you have swimming, cycling and running, and for those who come from a running background, the swim can obviously impact the event before you even really got into the guts of the race. When that happens, so if you have a bad swim and you've been dropped already, how do you make that switch to mentally go, okay, I'm not where I want to be, but how do I get the most out of my performance for today?
Yeah, and that's happened many a times where you have a really bad swim and you think, oh, goodness, this race is over. And then for some reason you come back into the mix and you actually end up having a really great performance with the bike and the run. And so I think it's important not to ride off the race after one bad discipline, because anything can happen. And, 100 Ks is a long time. It's anywhere between 3.5, 4.5 hours, maybe longer, depending on your ability. And I think at the end of the day, there's still a lot more to go after the swim. The swim's just such a small portion of it. So it's important to kind of refocus and I guess be present at whatever discipline you're doing at the moment, and trying to just get through that as best as you can. And I think there's a quote, and I'm not sure who initially said it, but I know Gwen Jorgensen used it a lot, and it was like, feelings don't dictate outcomes. And so there have been many like lead into races or race mornings where I just don't feel that good, and I put that mantra in my head to kind of, I guess, change the mindset where, like, just because you're feeling not so great in the morning doesn't necessarily mean the outcome's going to be not so great. So I think that can be applied during the race as well. Like, if you're not feeling great in the swim, that's okay, you still got the bike and the run to go. And I think anything can happen in a triathlon, and not just yourself, but your competitors as well. And obviously you wish everyone the best of luck and having the best race, but it is a long day and things happen.
I'm curious to know how you measure performance, because one of the things that I talked with my athletes about is a lot of them want to set, say, a particular time, sub 5 hours, or for yourself it would be like, I want to come top 3, but some of those things are impacted by other factors. Right. So what do other women do, sometimes the weather for the other athletes when it's time. So do you have other measures for your performance that aren't so much dictated by other factors?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can only control the controllables, which is obviously a very cliche thing to say, but at the end of the day, you kind of know at the end of the day whether the race was good in your eyes. And I think comparing to other people, or to times, especially if the conditions are different, or it's really windy or choppy swim, I think that it can give you a false success if things are in your favor. But also, I've had some really great races and come way further down position wise, but then I've also had races where I've won where I know that wasn't my best performance. So I think there's like an instinct. You know if it was good, if you kind of hit that flow state, which I think is still something that I'm chasing. I think it's pretty rare in the sport of triathlon to kind of enter that flow state and be in that flow state for the entire race. And that's why we like triathlons, because we're trying to chase that unachievable perfect race. I'm not sure that there's ever going to be a race where things go perfectly. And I think that's the exciting thing about triathlon, and that's why we keep coming back. So success, I think, at the end of the day is, do you enjoy doing what you're doing? Did you put down a performance you're proud of and that maybe reflects the training that you've done to get there? And if not, it's figuring out what went wrong and trying to do better for the next race. So comparing yourself with times and positions, I think maybe you're setting yourself up for failure rather than success.
Yeah, and our idea of success can certainly change. Little Grace would have had a different idea of success to Grace today, and
Exactly.
I'm sure Grace in another 5 years is probably going to have a different idea of success again. And I think we're going to allow ourselves to be flexible to that idea. And there's certainly things that can impact us that change that. COVID's a perfect example. You were racing as a professional before COVID hit.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually in New Zealand, which was Ironman's last race before going into COVID, and we went to lockdown the week after.
Mm-hmm.
And that would certainly change your idea of what success looked like in 2020, 2021. So how did you find that challenge, which everyone who's listening would have had to deal with some levels of challenge, whether it's, connect with loved ones because they're outside the 5K radius that we're allowed to have, or whatever it is. How did you manage when that all unfolded?
I think at the beginning, like a lot of people, it was a bit of an unknown of how long is this going to go on for. I also raced probably one of the last races before COVID, which was Geelong, and I think maybe closed down 1 or 2 weeks after that as well, or maybe a month later. But I think initially people were just training in hope that a race would come up soon and that COVID was going to be over a lot quicker than it was. And it kind of, I think a couple of months down the track, it kind of dawned on you okay, we're not going to be racing this year, so what can I do to set myself up physically and mentally to go the distance with COVID, and then how can I come out of it and race at the best shape? And I think for me, it was taking a very relaxed approach and doing the training, but not hammering the training. So taking some weeks that were easier and days off, and I guess just going with the flow in a way, because there was no real time frame. And I think there was one race towards the end of the year in December at Daytona, was probably the first professional race after COVID, but we had pretty strict travel restrictions, and I could have gone to that race, but I did end up focusing just on the next year. And I think everyone experienced COVID in a different way. I think for me, I actually, not that I enjoyed COVID and the lockdown, but my husband came out to Australia, and it was kind of the first time we lived since college together. We'd been doing long distance for 6 years prior to that, and so it was 1 year of just being not stuck in a house, but in close confinement compared to what we had been doing. And I think for us that was really an important part of our relationship. So from a personal level, COVID was really great because I got to spend more time with my person, and it was kind of what we needed to then decide, like, okay, we want to get married and we want a future together. After long distance, you see each other for a couple months at a time and you're like, yeah, this is good. But living together for a whole year was really important for us. And I think I enjoyed that aspect of it.
Definitely done the extremes of doing long
Yeah,
distance to
all or nothing.
all or nothing. And I think a lot of relationships go through COVID were, is this the one or not the one?
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
some were forced to realise that this is not the one, and now what's the next step? Because yes, as you and this is the thing with COVID is we had no idea in terms of timeline, and I think for yourself, you're a qualified physio, so you could have certainly gone back to doing more of a 9 to 5 job, and triathlon isn't exactly the most lucrative choice when you're choosing sport.
Yeah. Mum should have put me in tennis or
Tennis,
golf or something.
which to the tennis.
To be fair, she did, and I just wasn't very good at it.
To those who are in tennis, we're not saying you all make huge amounts of money, because we know it's in the top echelon.
It's really the top.
It is really
10,
the top,
probably.
and I think a lot of people watching tennis think it is huge amounts of money, and it is literally just the top. But which is kind of similar actually within our sport, but the top is a smaller fraction.
Yeah.
During that time of COVID, and had you contemplated, okay, I'm going to now just do physio and build my career through that? Or were you always like, no, this is what I want to do and I will find a way to make it happen?
Yeah, so I graduated from physio at the end of 2017, and so I started working part-time as a physio in 2018 at the same time that I took my pro card. So prior to COVID and during COVID, I worked part-time as a physio, part-time as a triathlete. I kind of had my foot in both doors, and it was kind of COVID that was the realization that I was not half-hearting, but a little bit just not committing fully to one or the other. And it was after COVID that I decided to kind of go all in with triathlon and focus on that aspect, because you can't be a triathlete forever. I can always go back to physio, and I think my parents always instilled from a young age to have something to fall back on, because sport isn't always reliable. And so I think it was time for me to go in and see what I could do with triathlon. And I am still working a little bit casually, seasonally, I guess, as a physiotherapist, mainly to keep up my APRA registration so it doesn't lapse. That day I do come back to physio. I don't have to, do a whole lot of additional.
Which you're with our partners at Life Care, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, correct. Yes, so I'm teaching Pilates classes at the moment, or clinical exercise Pilates classes, and really enjoying that aspect. It's kind of an opportunity to get my brain working again. I think as a triathlete, sometimes you switch off a little in terms of, I guess, that physio background that I'm used to, and the studying and that kind of aspect. Yeah, it's mentally stimulating in other ways, but I think having the mental stimulus of being back working as a physio and has been really a great balance for my life. And I'm usually doing it 4 or 5 months of the year, and then the rest of the year I'm embracing the triathlon lifestyle a little bit more.
Yeah, I think it's just hearing you talk about the balance within the imbalance. Like there's periods where it's very intensive triathlon focus, and other times you need to counterbalance the other way, where it's like I need to certainly disconnect. And I think that's sort of normal in life when you're going to be very much within the grind of whether it's building your business or focusing on your studies or at your training or wherever it is, that you're going to have to probably overbalance one way, and then you're going to certainly need to go, okay, what are the other things I need to do to counteract that? But there's also, even during those intense times, we need to find those little things that can make a big impact. So I think you were talking before about, your time with your dog or time with family members. How do you structure that in terms of like, okay, it's a 30-hour week, I'm going to be exhausted, but these are the things that are actually going to keep me sane and mentally fresh to be able to continue on for the long haul?
Yeah, I love being at home. Obviously, I'm overseas for a lot of the year. I think last year I was overseas for 7 months of the year, and I really enjoy my time at home. I love spending time with my family and my friends, my dogs. They keep me grounded. I think that this year I've especially learnt not to overcommit, because it's very easy when you're home to kind of overcommit to social events and, going out, for coffee, even if it's just, an hour or so. It's great, but sometimes it can take away from triathlon, and especially now with working and training a little bit more as well, triathlon training. It's finding the balance, and I think it's I do find myself sometimes overcommitting to things when I'm in Melbourne. But I also know there's times where I live more of a triathlon monk life. Not so much 100%, but more, as you said, shifted towards that aspect of my life. So it's just kind of appreciating, the time of the year around racing and training. And given it's my off season, I give myself a little bit more grace in terms of, going to more events and concerts and hanging out with my family. And, I'm very fortunate that I'm close with my family, and at this stage I'm back living with my parents. I get to see them every day, which is really great because, there's obviously long periods of time where I don't get to see them at all. So, I think, there's always like kind of the balance, as you said, it's always shifting depending on location and where I am in the season. So at the moment, I'm just embracing being at home, and obviously the weather's super nice as well. So I think these little things make you a happy athlete. And as I said earlier, a happy athlete is a fast athlete. And I really see that in my results races, that I'm feeling really happy in my life, my best results. So just kind of making sure that even if I am 100 more shifted to the triathlon, that I am still getting some kind of balance, because I don't know if I would be a great athlete if I was just 100% triathlon monk life.
Just starting to look now forward to this year, something I've been discussing with my athletes is goal setting, and how you decide on the goals and the why behind them. Because a lot of people just set a goal of like, I want to race an Ironman, and they haven't really thought about why and whether it's, challenging their other goals or not. So sometimes we might set a goal of, I want to spend more time with family. And then I've also set a goal is I want to do more training, but those two things are actually working against each other. So how do you decide on what your goals are going to be, your why behind them? And another thing I've been discussing with the athletes is really setting sort of two targets. One is the ambitious goal of, say, racing the T100 series and getting a podium there, which is a very high level of achievement. And the standard that you set for yourself of, okay, when I race, whatever race I'm racing at, that I'm present, I'm enjoying the moment, and you sort of live somewhere within that realm of aiming for higher, aiming for something that probably seems almost out of reach, to a level that's also within a standard of like, I'll be happy at the end of the day. Because otherwise, if we're always aiming for higher, we sort of feel like we fall short of, and then we sort of beat ourselves up. So, how do you set your goals and you decide what's the most value of where you put in your energy?
Yeah, I think this year's a little bit unique for me in that I got a contract for the T100, so my race schedule's a little bit more fixed than it has been in the past. In the past, I've kind of just gone with the flow and raced, my schedule, but also added in, T100 wildcards last year and raced a lot. I think it's important to, have your key races that you really want to nail, and then the other races making sure that you've prepared well enough and you're in a position where you can do your best, but maybe a little bit less expectations on yourself for that. I think, it's hard because obviously everyone wants a goal that is, I want to win the world championship, or I want to qualify. And I think it's hard because it's reliant on how other people go. So as I said earlier, it's kind of more like process goals and did I do my best performance? And I think for me this year, I'm excited to do T100 races because last year I did 4, but there were wildcard slots and I only found out pretty close to the race. So I think this year just having preparation is going to be key to a better outcome. But yeah, it is hard to peak for, I think this year I have 7 races on my calendar. You can't be at your peak for all 7, but it's just kind of trusting in the training and knowing where they sit in the season, and then as you said, having other goals outside, whether it is spending more time or having intention around the time you spend with other people that elevate you, I think is really important in, I guess, your longevity in the sport as well, because you can burn out really quickly if you're so fixated on a triathlon goal and you don't see kind of the bigger picture of enjoying life and the process, you know, like the journey is more important sometimes. Like finding joy in the journey is something that I like to think of, because at the end of the day, it's just one race and it comes and goes, but you remember kind of the moments leading up to that race more than the race itself.
Which is sort of easier said than done, isn't it?
Very
We so often
yeah.
say, yeah, enjoy the journey, but
Yeah.
sometimes the journey is also very difficult.
Yeah.
And we are, as humans, we're always striving to achieve more, and it's very easy to be like, oh, that next thing, the next thing, but it's like, okay, I need to be present. And we have the same thing within a race, where it's like, if I can just get to the run, because you know, that is where you sort of dominate. You do come through the field on the run, and you're like, if you're so busy focused on, I need to get to the run, you're not then present in the swim and bike and be able to perform the way you need to perform in that moment.
I think breaking everything up into little steps, and that's, you know, goal setting. You obviously have your long-term, medium-term, short-term goals. And like, for instance, last week I opened my training peaks and I was like, oh, wow, this is the biggest week I've ever had. And it seemed a little bit overwhelming, but then I thought, okay, well, if I look at each individual day, it's not so bad. So you just take, you know, each session as it comes, and then at the end of the day, you're like, okay, I did that day and that was great. And then you look at the next day, and I think if you get too far ahead of yourself is when you start to feel overwhelmed. So yeah, just taking the little steps and appreciating the little goals along the way to get to where you want to go.
What did you, I'm just curious, when you looked at the training peaks and you saw this spread of amount of training, was this due to just the amount of volume, or is it because of, you know, you've had history with some injuries? Is it concern of, is my body going to hold up? Like, what was it you're most concerned about, and how did you manage mentally? Did you have to then go back to the coach and say, these are my thoughts, concerns, or did you just have a dialogue within yourself? What was the...
It was mainly an internal dialogue. I think that I am fearful a lot of the time with my injury history. So when it's a big running week, it seems a little bit overwhelming. This week in particular, it was more a bike riding focus, which is something I haven't necessarily put that many hours. I think I ended up with 16 hours on the bike, which my previously biggest week was the week before, which was like 12 hours and 45 minutes. So it was a big jump up, but none of the sessions seemed unachievable by themselves. They all seemed appropriate and challenging, but kind of, it was fun. I think I was kind of excited about the week because it was something I'd never done before. So I guess that excitement level made me kind of more open, I guess, to the change.
So moving into this year, we discussed the race calendar and stuff. Is there anything else that has been a big change for you? Anything that you're having to adapt to? And then how do you find that then fits into what you've already had sort of going on for a period of time? So obviously you've had consistency now with your partner, and which I think sounds like it has a big impact on you. But there's been other things that you've had to make a decision, whether it's a change of bike or a change of gear, and then having to adapt to that. And how do you allow yourself to not get too caught up with all of these changes, particularly within our sport? There's always new tech coming out. There's always new stuff. And it's like, how do you just continue to keep the things which are working, and when to make the changes that you need to make? Yeah,
well, this year kind of has been a big change for me. I decided to change my coach. I've been with my previous coach for 10 years, and we had such a great partnership, and I had huge respect for him, and I just felt like it was time in my professional career to make a change. Obviously on a personal level, we're still friends, and but it was the hardest decision I've ever had to make in my professional career, and maybe even my life. It was hard, and I'm still processing it as well. I know that I've made a decision for my professional career, and I'm actually really excited about the changes that I've made in my training in the last month since switching to a new coach. So it definitely has been a change, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride, if I'm being honest. But I'm excited about the year ahead, and I think, sometimes you gotta, have change for growth. So that's kind of my mindset for this year. And this year I'm also planning to debut in my first full distance triathlon, which I'm really excited about. But with that comes...
Can you let us say where?
I'll say not just now.
You're going to give us a region? You're going to give us any sort of...
There might be beer after.
Okay.
But at this stage, yet to be announced. But I'm really excited about the prospect of that. It's a new challenge, and I think it's easy, I guess. This is my 8th year as a professional. It still feels sometimes that it's my rookie year, but at the same time, I'm looking for a change and a challenge, and jumping at the opportunity to be a contracted T100 athlete was really exciting. I'd actually planned my whole season the day before I got the message, and so initially I was like, oh, I'm pretty happy with my season that I had planned, but then the opportunity to do T100 and be able to prepare more fully for the races was really exciting. And I'm one who doesn't shy away from racing the best. If you look at my races in the past couple of years, I like to race the best athletes in the world in competitive races, and so to be able to line up against the best is really exciting and something that challenges me. I know it humbles me. At times it can be a little disheartening to know how far I've got to go to reach that top pointy end of the race, but it's a challenge, and I'm always up for a challenge. So this year is lots of different changes and challenges, and it excites me.
You certainly don't play it safe. You certainly do choose the big races and to compete against the biggest names in the sport. And for those of us who don't reach that level within sport, there are other spaces that we all live within where we could probably challenge ourselves a little bit more rather than playing it safe. Whether it's for myself, choosing to do a podcast, there's always things that we can do to push ourselves outside of our comfort zone. And it's whether we're really pushing ourselves outside that comfort zone enough. And I think
it's scary. It's so scary to jump out of your comfort zone. I think it takes a lot of bravery to do something new. And I think, you with this podcast and, myself, jumping up to the full distance and making a coaching change, it's scary because I think a lot of us are creature of habits.
Yep.
And, well, I know I am. And I like to not so much play it safe, but I do like my things familiar. And so making big changes can be scary, but also I think it's worth the risk. You'll never know if you don't give it a try. And I think that's the exciting part is at least, when I retire, I'll look back with no regrets because I've at least given it a shot.
And it's where we actually learn the most about ourselves, and we get a lot more value out of the journey, as we were talking about before, rather than just sort of, I guess, playing it safe. It's very easy, I think, at times to go, well, this is what I know and this is what I'm comfortable with, but to be able to then push ourselves. And for some, it's like just signing up for their first triathlon, and that's a big deal. Even just being in that water around with all those other people can seem hugely stressful and full of anxiety. And, am I going to all these what ifs questions that go in our headspace, but then just dealing with the moment, being, okay, I'm here, I've got myself to this point, and I can take the next step forward. And
it's like the sense of accomplishment too, when you look at something thinking it's almost impossible and then you do it and you just feel so proud of yourself, I think, for taking that step when a lot of people wouldn't necessarily, jump out of their comfort zones.
And it doesn't need to be on Instagram. It doesn't have to be like some big showy thing. No. I think sometimes for myself, even sometimes you set a session, and I remember one of my sessions that I used to do when I was training full time, it was end up being like a 30K track session. So we're doing repeats of a mile on, and then 400 meter jog float recovery. And when the first time I completed that 30K set, I was like, there's no one else there. It was just me in the track, and it was just very rewarding. I think those moments of self-satisfaction of the thing that you've been able to achieve when you wasn't sure if it was going to be possible, is a big part of the journey as well. It's like, it doesn't need to be all showy. It doesn't have to be out there for everyone to give you all this kudos on Strava or anything else.
And I think, thinking about that too, it's, I guess, an understanding too that your coach has belief in you to do a session that he's set that you think, oh, I'm not going to do. Because there's been so many sessions in the past that I look at on paper like, I'm not going to be able to do this. This is nearly impossible. And then you end up doing it and you're so proud of yourself, but it kind of makes you realize that the people that support you have, belief in you, and that you just have to have a little bit more belief in yourself and give it a crack. And sometimes it's a failure. And well, I don't even know if it's a failure. Sometimes you learn lessons along the way, and that's valuable in itself. And you might be able to just execute the session the next time, or it might take a few weeks. But yeah, that accomplishment of doing it, and the belief that your coach has in you, that they're setting a session that they think you can do, is, I think, important too.
And I think that's one of the small, sometimes seem insignificant things that do impact us a lot, those around us that have the belief in us before possibly even we believe in ourselves.
For sure.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of us, we need to try and lean on those things, those people, to help build that self-confidence for us to be able to achieve more, because certainly in life we need to try and push ourselves to get that experience of self-satisfaction that comes from those challenges.
Yeah, for sure.
Grace Thek, thank you for joining us on the Kaizen Show. We appreciate you for coming on, and until next time, dream big, take action, and enjoy the journey.
Thanks for having me.